The first thing I saw was a yellow slide hanging over black mud. Not grass, mud. Two workers were setting playground posts beside the marsh while water seeped into the holes faster than they could pour gravel. Vivian Rusk stood near my late wife's cedar birding platform, one hand on her tablet, smiling like she was opening a park. "That old thing needs to come down," she said. "It ruins the view." I didn't answer. I just looked at the half-buried orange flag beside her shoe. "A 4-buffer. Before I get into it, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if stories about quiet landowners and overreaching HOAs matter to you, subscribe and stay with me." Because what Vivian didn't know was simple. That playground wasn't just in the wrong place. It was on protected wetlands. My name is Elias Crowder, and I have lived beside Brindle Heron Marsh long enough to know the sound mud makes when it is being disrespected. It has a soft pull to it, a little gasp, like the ground is trying to warn you before it gives way. My place sits on the older edge of Pelican Trace, outside Fairhope, Alabama. Back when I bought it, there was no stone entrance sign, no polished mailboxes, no monthly newsletter full of smiling families and rules about trash cans. There was just my small house, the marsh, and a line of pine trees that leaned toward the water, like they were listening. My wife, Mara, loved that marsh more than I did at first. She was the one who noticed the herons came back to the same bend every spring. She named them, too. Not scientific names. Personal ones. Tall Henry, Miss Blue, the judge. She said that last one always looked disappointed in everybody. After her knees got bad, I built her a cedar birding platform about 20 yards behind the house. Nothing fancy. 4 posts, a low rail, and enough room for 1 chair, 1 thermos, and her little notebook. The railing turned silver in the sun, smooth in the middle where her hands used to rest, and after rain, it still carried that clean cedar smell mixed with salt grass and dark water. That platform was the last place she stood outside without holding my arm. So when Vivian Rusk walked up with 2 board members and a man carrying orange spray paint, I already knew I wasn't going to like whatever she had rehearsed. Vivian was the HOA president, cream blouse, gold watch, smile sharp enough to cut fishing line. She looked past me first, toward the marsh, like I was just another old thing on the property that would eventually be cleared. "Mr. Crowder," she said, "we're excited to let you know the community playground is moving forward." I looked behind her. Workers had set little white stakes near the wet edge. "That ground holds water," I said. She gave me the kind of smile people use when they have already decided you are a problem. "It's been evaluated." "By who?" "Our planning committee." That was not an answer, but I let it sit. Near her shoe, half bent in the mud, was an old orange wetland flag. Faded, but readable. A 4-buffer. I had seen that marking before, years earlier, before Pelican Trace started calling itself a community, before glossy maps turned the marsh into a selling point. Vivian followed my eyes and stepped in front of the flag. "We also need to discuss that platform," she said. "It may interfere with the playground view corridor." "The platform is on my property. For now, we're simply asking for cooperation." Behind her, the man with spray paint shook his can and marked a bright line through the grass. That was when I understood. They weren't building near the wetland. They were building into it. The first letter came 3 days later. It was printed on thick HOA, stationery with Pelican Trace's little blue heron logo at the top, which always struck me as funny since most of the board couldn't tell a heron from a dock post. Notice of non-compliance. That was the heading.
According to the letter, my cedar platform was an unapproved accessory structure interfering with planned common area enhancement. It said I had 10 days to remove it or face daily fines. It also said my continued obstruction of family-oriented community improvements would be discussed at the next open board meeting.
I read it twice at my kitchen table. Then I read what was missing. No parcel number, no permit reference, no environmental clearance, no recorded authority giving them control over anything behind my house. Just polished words stacked high enough to look official from a distance. I wrote back the same afternoon.
I asked for the approved site plan, the environmental review, the wetland boundary determination, and the document showing HOA authority to build inside the marked buffer. I sent it certified mail. I kept a copy in the blue folder Mara used to store bird counts.
Vivian responded by email. Mr. Crowder, the board is not obligated to entertain delay tactics from individual homeowners. That was all. At the meeting, the room was packed. Young parents sat in folding chairs, most of them excited about the playground. I understood that. I really did. Children need places to run. Parents need safe spots where they can breathe for 5 minutes while their kids wear themselves out. That was never the part I objected to. Vivian stood at the front with a rendering on an easel. Bright swings, a climbing wall, a fake little bridge. Behind it, the marsh was drawn as a soft green blur, like nature existed to decorate the project. Then she looked straight at me. Some residents, she said, believe personal attachment should outweigh community progress. A few heads turned. I kept my hands folded. She clicked to the next slide. There was a dotted line where my birding platform stood. We cannot allow outdated private sentiment to hold back a neighborhood built for families. I heard a woman behind me whisper, "Isn't he the widower with that old deck?" Another voice answered, "I think he just doesn't want kids near his yard." That one landed harder than I expected. Vivian smiled like she had been waiting for the room to settle into her side. Then she said the line I remembered later, word for word. Protected doesn't mean untouched, Mr. Crowder. It means managed by people with vision. I looked at the rendering again. In the lower corner, almost hidden beneath the Pelican Trace logo, was another mark. A developer's emblem. Marbury Coastal Homes. That was when the playground stopped looking like a community project and started looking like a sales brochure with bolts. The next morning, the marsh had tire tracks in it. Not deep at first, just 2 brown cuts pressed through the grass where a small loader had backed down from the common road. But anyone who has worked wet ground knows the first track is an invitation. The second one is damage. I stood at the edge of my yard with a mug of coffee cooling in my hand and watched a contractor unload bags of gravel. He was a young man, maybe 30, with a sunburned neck and a pencil tucked behind one ear. He looked more tired than mean. Most people carrying out bad decisions are like that. They are not villains. They are just paid by someone who stopped asking questions. I took pictures. Wide shots first, then close ones. Footprints, filling with water. Mud pushed over marsh grass. A bent orange flag lying beside a stack of treated lumber. The little aluminum tag was dirty, but I could still read it. A 4 buffer. I photographed that too. Vivian arrived around 9 in a white SUV with the Pelican Trace decal on the back window. She stepped out holding a folder and talking on the phone. "Yes, the preview is still on schedule," she said. "Families need to see progress." When she noticed me, her smile changed shape. "Mr. Crowder," she said, "I hope you are not interfering with licensed contractors." "I'm documenting." "For what purpose?" "For the record." She did not like that answer. One of the board members, a nervous man named Clay Henson, walked behind her carrying a roll of plans. He avoided looking at the wet ground. That told me something. People who believe they are right look straight at the thing they are defending. The contractor with the pencil came over and lowered his voice. "Sir, you live here." "I do." He glanced toward Vivian, then at the orange flag. "We were told the buffer line got moved." "Who told you that?" He swallowed. "The board." Vivian snapped her folder shut. "Please don't engage with him," she told the contractor. "He's already been notified." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just lifted my phone and took another picture while she was still standing beside the disturbed flag. That was my old training coming back without permission. 30 years in wetland restoration teaches you to photograph more than damage. You photograph context, weather, angles, tire direction, who was present, what was moved, and what was left behind. Because later, when people start saying they didn't know, the ground has a way of remembering. By noon, I had sent a second certified letter to Vivian, the HOA board, and Marbury Coastal Homes. I included 3 photographs and 1 sentence. "You are constructing inside a marked wetland buffer and should stop until written authorization is produced." At 4:17 that afternoon, the postal receipt showed Vivian Rusk had signed for it. At 4:39, a worker pulled another orange flag from the mud and kept digging. The county records office in Baldwin County smelled like paper, floor wax, and air conditioning that had been running since 1987. I got there before lunch with my blue folder under one arm. The woman at the counter wore red glasses on a chain and had the calm expression of somebody who had watched 1,000 property arguments walk through that door pretending to be simple. Her name tag said Renee. "What are we looking for?" she asked. "Wetland delineation around Brindle Heron Marsh," I said. "Pelican Trace subdivision, Phase 3, maybe Phase 4. Renee looked up over her glasses. "That one, again." I didn't answer right away. She typed for a while, then disappeared into a side room with rolling shelves. When she came back, she had 2 file jackets and a rolled map tied with cotton tape. "Developers love marsh views," she said, laying the first folder down. "They don't always love marsh rules." That was the kind of sentence clerks earn after years of reading what people hope nobody else would. The first map showed the subdivision before the roads were paved, lots, drainage ponds, common areas, and the wetland cells drawn in uneven shapes along the marsh edge, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7. The playground location sat right across A4. "Not near it. Across it." Renee turned another page. "Here's the jurisdictional determination." My fingers slowed when I saw the stamp. State Certified Wetland Delineation. Core file number, date, conditions. There it was. No grading, filling, drainage, construction, or recreational improvement shall occur within wetland cells, A3 through A7, or the 50-foot upland buffer, without written authorization from the department and the Corps. I read it once, then again. Renee watched my face. "That phrase matters, doesn't it?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." Under the permit application was a thinner sheet, folded in half. I almost passed over it, until I saw Mara's handwriting. Small, slanted, careful. Brindle Heron volunteer bird count. She had written down 6 great blue herons, 2 snowy egrets, 1 osprey, and a note at the bottom that said, "Elias says the judge looks guilty today." I had to put my hand flat on the counter for a second. Renee looked away. Kindness, sometimes, is knowing when not to watch. I slipped the bird count behind the map and kept reading. Then I found the page that changed the whole shape of it. Pelican Trace's own environmental permit application, signed by a Marbury Coastal Homes representative. Attached to it was a site restriction acknowledgement. The language was plain. No common area amenity, recreational structure, trail, platform, playground, or improvement shall be placed inside the delineated wetland buffer. That meant somebody had known. Not guessed, known. I paid for certified copies of the map, the determination, the permit application, and the restriction acknowledgement. Renee stamped each one with a heavy sound that felt almost final. Before I left, she tapped the A4 cell with one red fingernail. "People argue about property lines all the time," she said. "Wetlands are different. The land keeps its own records." I carried the copies to my truck and sat there without starting the engine. For the first time, I understood exactly what Vivian had built, and exactly what she had buried. By the time I got home, the playground posts were standing upright. Bright blue, bright yellow, bright enough to make the mud around them look even darker. I parked in my driveway and stayed behind the wheel for a minute. The certified copies sat on the passenger seat in a brown envelope. I had what I needed. Still, part of me wished I had acted 2 days earlier. That was my flaw. I knew it. I had always told myself patience was wisdom, but sometimes patience is just fear wearing better clothes. A contractor was dragging caution tape around Mara's cedar platform. I got out slowly. "What are you doing?" I asked. He looked uncomfortable. "Board instruction, sir." Vivian stood near the platform with Clay Henson beside her. She had one of my certified letters in her hand. The wind lifted the corner of it. Clay pointed toward the mud where an orange flag lay half buried. "Vivian," he said quietly. "That tag number matches the map he sent." She looked down. For 1 second, her face changed. "Not much, just enough." Her smile disappeared, and her eyes moved from the flag to the playground posts, then to the road where 2 Marbury Coastal Homes banners had been tied to the entrance fence. Family preview weekend. Saturday, at 10. Clay lowered his voice again. "Are we sure that buffer line is wrong?" Vivian did not answer right away. That was the moment. The little pause every bad decision gets before it becomes permanent. Then she folded my letter in half. "The board has already approved this project," she said. "We are not stopping because Mr. Crowder is sentimental about a swamp." I felt my hand tighten around the truck key. Not because she called it a swamp, because she was standing beside the place where Mara used to count birds, and making it sound like grief was a zoning violation. The worker wrapped another strip of caution tape across the platform rail. "Unsafe structure." Those words hung over Mara's chair like an accusation. I stepped closer. "That platform is on my property," I said. Vivian turned so the contractors and 2 neighbors could hear her. "It is adjacent to a community improvement area and creates an attractive nuisance. The board has a responsibility to families." "Show me the authorization." She smiled again. "We don't need to keep indulging this." Then she looked at the foreman. "Remove those remaining flags and pour the footings before the weather turns." The foreman hesitated. "Ma'am, he's saying wetlands." "He's saying a lot of things." Nobody moved for a second. Then one worker bent down, pulled the A4 flag from the mud, and tossed it into a scrap pile beside the lumber. I lifted my phone. I recorded the concrete truck backing in. I recorded Vivian watching. I recorded the wet soil filling around the first footing while brown water rose along the edges. When the truck engine finally cut off, the marsh sounded too quiet. I sent one final email with the photos attached. Then I called the Environmental Compliance Office. This time, I did not wait. Inspector Nora Bell arrived the next morning in a state truck with mud on the tires and no interest in Vivian's welcome speech. That was the first thing I noticed. Vivian tried to meet her at the curb with a folder, a smile, and the kind of voice people use when they believe titles matter more than facts. Inspector Bell, thank you for coming. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding, stirred up by one resident. Nora looked past her. She looked at the playground posts. Then at the water standing around the concrete footings. Then at the scrap pile where the orange flags had been thrown. I'll start at the disturbance area, she said. Vivian's smile held, but barely. It was Saturday morning, so the family preview had already pulled a crowd. Parents stood near the sidewalk with coffee cups. Children pointed at the yellow slide still wrapped in plastic. 2 Marbury Coastal Homes banners snapped against the fence in the wind. Nobody knew whether to leave or watch. Most stayed. I walked up with my blue folder and kept my voice low. Inspector, I have certified copies, photographs, and mailing receipts. Nora nodded once. Set them on the tailgate, please. That was all. No drama, no speech. Just a woman who knew how to work a site. She pulled on rubber boots, stepped into the mud, and lifted one of the discarded flags by the wire stem. The aluminum tag was streaked brown, but the stamped letters still showed. A 4 buffer. Nora wiped it with her thumb. Where was this placed before removal? She asked. I pointed to the spot beside the first footing. Vivian cut in. Those markers were old. The board was advised the usable common area had been adjusted. Nora looked at her. By whom? Vivian opened her folder. Our planning committee reviewed the project. That is not what I asked. The crowd got quiet in a way that felt physical. Even the children seemed to sense the adults had stopped pretending. Nora unfolded the certified wetland map I had brought from the county office. She lined the paper with the playground layout, then turned toward the marsh. This is Wetland Cellar 4, she said. Clay Henson, the board member, rubbed his forehead and looked at Vivian. Vivian reached for a page in her binder. Then another. Her fingers moved faster. Nora asked the question plainly. Where is the written authorization allowing recreational construction inside Wetland Cell A4 and its 50-foot buffer? Vivian did not answer. She kept looking through the binder like the right page might appear, if she punished the paper enough. A father near the sidewalk lowered his coffee cup. Someone whispered, "Wait, this was protected." Nora held up the muddy orange flag. This marker was not decorative, she said. For the first time since the whole thing started, Vivian Rusk looked unsure in front of everyone. And then, Nora reached for the stamped determination. Nora Bell unfolded the stamped determination on the tailgate of her truck. The paper had creases from age, but the seal was clear. State-certified wetland delineation, core jurisdictional determination. Brindle Heron Marsh, Pelican Trace Subdivision. Vivian stood beside the playground with her binder pressed against her ribs. She had stopped smiling. Nora ran one finger down the page until she found the condition. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. No grading, filling, drainage, construction, or recreational improvement shall occur within Wetland Cells A3 through A7 or the 50-foot upland buffer without written authorization from the department and the Corps. The words moved through the crowd slowly. You could almost see people replaying the playground flyer in their heads. The bright slide, the fake bridge, the promise of nature-side play. All of it suddenly looked different when it was standing in mud that had never belonged to the HOA's imagination. A mother near the sidewalk pulled her little boy closer. "So this wasn't permitted?" she asked. Nora looked at the footings, then at Vivian. "I have not been shown authorization." Vivian found her voice again, but it came out thinner. This was intended as a low-impact family amenity. The community needed usable green space. "That is not an authorization," Nora said. Clay Henson stared at the ground. One of the contractors shifted his weight and said, "We were told the line moved." Nora turned to him. "Who told you to remove the wetland markers?" Nobody answered. I stood beside the tailgate with my hands in my pockets. Part of me wanted to say something. I wanted to tell them I had asked. I had warned them. I had watched them tape off Mara's platform like it was trash. But Mara used to tell me, "Elias, you don't have to spend every truth the moment you get it." So I stayed quiet. That silence did more than anger would have. A father I recognized from the meeting stepped toward me. He had been one of the men nodding when Vivian called me sentimental. "I thought you were just trying to keep kids away," he said. I looked at the playground posts, sunk into wet ground. "I was trying to keep them off land that wasn't safe to build on." He nodded once. Not a full apology. Not yet. But something in his face changed. Behind him, another parent said, "Then why did the flyer say approved?" Vivian turned sharply. "The board relied on available information." Nora lifted the HOA permit application from my folder. "This application references the same restriction," she said, "so the information was available." That was the moment the room turned, even though we were outside. People stepped back from Vivian. Not far, just enough. Nora wrote on a yellow form against her clipboard. "Effective immediately. This site is under stop work order pending review, restoration assessment, and production of all HOA and contractor communications related to the disturbance." The wind moved across the marsh grass. Vivian looked at the half-built playground like it had betrayed her. But it had only done what bad decisions do. It stood there and told on everybody. The removal order came 5 days later. By then, the playground was wrapped in orange safety fencing, sitting half-finished in the mud, like a bright plastic confession. Children no longer pointed at it with excitement. Parents slowed down when they walked by, read the posted stop work notice, and got quiet. The order was specific. All playground equipment had to be removed. All concrete footings inside wetland cell. A4 had to be extracted under supervision. Disturbed soil had to be stabilized. Native marsh grass had to be replanted. The HOA was responsible for remediation costs, contractor review, and civil penalties pending final assessment. There was no paragraph about intentions. There rarely is. Vivian tried to call an emergency meeting before the board called one on her. That was how fast things changed. The same people who had nodded along when she talked about vision now wanted invoices, emails, permit copies, and the names of everyone who had approved the project. Clay Henson spoke first. "I asked whether the buffer line was wrong," he said. "I was told the issue had been handled." Vivian sat at the table with both hands folded tight. "That is not a fair characterization." A woman in the second row stood up holding the playground flyer. "My kids were supposed to play there," she said. "Were you going to tell us it was built on restricted land?" Vivian looked toward the developer's empty chair. Marbury Coastal Homes had sent a letter instead of a person. They expressed concern, denied directing illegal construction, and promised cooperation with any investigation. The kind of letter that wears a clean shirt to a dirty job. By the end of the meeting, Vivian resigned as HOA president. Not with grace, not with apology. She said she was stepping down because misinformation had made leadership impossible. Nobody clapped. The fines against me were canceled in writing the next morning. The unsafe structure notice on Mara's platform was withdrawn. The HOA's attorney sent a separate letter acknowledging that the platform sat outside HOA authority and could not be used, marked, restricted, or cited by the board. I read that line twice. Then, I folded the letter and put it in Mara's bird count folder. The remediation crew came the following week. They worked carefully, under Nora Bell's supervision. The playground posts came out first, then the concrete, then the churned-up soil was reshaped by hand where machinery would have made it worse. Watching them remove it did not feel like victory. It felt like watching someone take a boot off a throat. One afternoon, while the crew was packing up, Nora asked me about the cedar platform. "My wife used to sit there," I said. She waited. It was the last thing I built for her while she could still walk out to the marsh. Nora looked at the rail, still marked where the caution tape had rubbed it pale. "Then I'm glad they didn't get to decide what it was worth." That evening, I stood by the platform and touched the cedar. The fight was over, but the quiet had not come back yet. The first morning the herons came back, I was sanding the cedar rail. Not much, just enough to smooth the place where the caution tape had rubbed it raw. The wood gave off that same clean, peppery smell it always had after rain. And for a minute I could almost hear Mara behind me, correcting my work like she used to. "You missed a spot, Elias." She always said that. And she was usually right. The marsh looked wounded, but alive. Fresh plugs of cord grass stood in neat rows where the playground footings had been. The soil was still darker there, still soft from being opened and closed again, but water moved through it the way it was supposed to, slow, patient, unimpressed by people with clipboards and slogans. The HOA had hired a new board president by then. They sent me one formal apology and one reimbursement check for the platform repairs. I cashed the check. I kept the apology in the folder. Some people expected me to frame it. I didn't. Paper matters when rights are being challenged. After that, it can go back in a drawer. A few neighbors stopped by over the next 2 weeks. Not all at once, not with speeches. One father helped me carry new boards from the truck. The mother who had asked about the flyer brought a thermos of coffee and stood quietly at the marsh edge. "I'm sorry," she said. I nodded. That was enough. I have learned that apologies do not have to fix everything to mean something. Sometimes they just mark the first honest place after a long stretch of pretending. Vivian moved out of Pelican Trace before summer ended. Marbury Coastal Homes still claimed they never pressured her. But Nora Bell told me the review of communications was not finished. Maybe Vivian acted alone. Maybe she was pushed by people who understood exactly how far a board president would go to protect her own pride. I still do not know. That part stayed open. But the wetland was protected. The playground was gone. Mara's platform was mine again. That was the center of it. I set her old chair back in its place and opened the bird count notebook. The pages had yellowed, and one corner still carried a faint stain from the tea she used to drink. Across the marsh, a great blue heron stepped through the shallows. Tall, careful, guilty-looking. The judge had returned. I laughed once, softer than I expected. That whole fight had never really been about stopping children from playing. It was about remembering that Land has boundaries, grief has dignity, and quiet people are not the same thing as weak people. Some folks need a crowd to prove they matter. Some of us just need the marsh to breathe right again. If you were in Elias's position, what would you have done when the HOA kept building after being warned? Would you have stayed quiet and gathered proof, or stepped in sooner before the damage was done? And if you have ever seen an HOA developer or board cross a line with property, land, water, or protected space, share your story in the comments. Tell me where you are watching from, too. I always like knowing how far these stories travel. If this story spoke to you, give it a like, subscribe, and stay with the channel. There are more stories coming about quiet people, careful records, and the day the paperwork finally speaks.